In the quiet Canadian city of Kelmont, one random night changed everything. Ryan Keller, a hard-working university student, was brutally attacked just steps from home. Detectives Lisa Monroe and David Chen raced to uncover the truth, but the trail led them to Ethan Miles, a troubled neighbor with a violent past. Ryan's professor, Mark Ellis, painted him as a promising future scholar, while his friend Sarah Turner revealed the fears he had kept hidden. As the case unfolded, the city discovered a chilling truth. The line between safety and danger was far thinner than anyone had ever believed. Kelmont was the kind of Canadian city that barely made the news. Nestled between wooded hills and a wide, slow-moving river, it was a quiet place where families raised children without worry and students filled the small university campus with energy. The streets were lined with maple trees, and evenings were marked by the faint sound of televisions behind half-drawn curtains or the soft chatter of neighbors on porches. For years, it carried a reputation for safety. Crimes were rare, usually nothing more than petty thefts or the occasional bar fight. That sense of calm was part of Kelmont's identity, until the night it was shattered forever. It was a late autumn evening, cool and crisp, with the smell of damp leaves hanging in the air. Ryan Keller, a 22-year-old university student, was walking home from the library. He was tired but focused, carrying a stack of notes for an upcoming exam. His route was simple and well-worn. Down Oakridge Avenue, past a row of quiet houses, and through a short stretch of residential streets that led straight to his apartment. It was a walk he had taken countless times before, one he could do half asleep without fear. But that night, safety disappeared in an instant. Around 11:15 p.m., a piercing cry shattered the silence. Neighbors along Oakridge Avenue heard it, a single desperate sound that made people rush to their windows. Some thought it was an animal at first, but the sound came again, unmistakably human. A porch light flicked on, and then another. By the time a few residents stepped outside, the source of the noise became horribly clear. Ryan Keller lay in the middle of the street, motionless at first, then writhing weakly in pain. His face was battered, his jacket torn, and one of his hands twisted at an unnatural angle. There were deep bruises forming across his body, as if he had been struck multiple times with brutal force. The sight was so shocking that for a moment no one knew what to do. Then someone screamed for help. Another neighbor dialed emergency services, and a handful of people ran to Ryan's side. What unsettled everyone was the absence of an attacker. Whoever had done this was gone. Neighbors scanned the shadows between houses, the tree-lined yards, the driveways lit only by dim bulbs, but saw nothing. Whoever struck Ryan had vanished as quickly as they appeared. It wasn't a mugging. His wallet, phone, and backpack were still with him. Nothing was taken. This wasn't a robbery gone wrong, nor a fight between acquaintances. It was something far more disturbing, a random, violent attack with no clear reason. When paramedics arrived, Ryan was barely conscious, mumbling words no one could understand. As he was rushed to the hospital, police officers sealed off the street, searching for any sign of the attacker. Residents huddled in groups, whispering, frightened. The sense of safety Kelmont had always clung to was gone, replaced by something the city had never felt before. Fear that violence could erupt at random, striking anyone at any time. That night marked the beginning of a story that would transform Kelmont, from a quiet city into the center of one of the most unsettling true crime cases in Canada. The hours following the attack were chaotic. Police officers moved door to door across Oakridge Avenue, questioning anyone who might have seen or heard something. Many residents recalled the same chilling moment, a cry for help, then silence, followed by the sound of hurried footsteps fading into the night. But when asked for details about the figure seen fleeing, the accounts varied. One neighbor swore it was a tall man in a dark hoodie who sprinted past her window. Another insisted the figure was shorter, possibly limping as if injured or unsteady. A teenager claimed they heard the scrape of metal against pavement, like a weapon being dragged, though no weapon was found at the scene. The only physical evidence collected was a single glove lying near a backyard fence. It was smeared with blood, but it was impossible to tell whether it belonged to Ryan or the attacker. Forensic teams worked quickly, bagging the glove and combing the area for footprints. The damp ground made it difficult, but faint impressions suggested the attacker had cut through several yards before disappearing into the wooded strip that bordered the neighborhood. Dogs were brought in to follow the trail, but the scent was quickly lost among the fallen leaves and moisture of the night. It was as if the attacker had melted into the landscape. At the hospital, doctors worked to stabilize Ryan. His injuries were severe: multiple fractures, a concussion, and deep bruising along his ribs. The violence had been frenzied, with no restraint. Whoever carried out the attack had not intended to scare him but to cause as much damage as possible. That detail unnerved investigators. Random attacks are often messy but brief. This had been brutal, deliberate, and prolonged enough to leave Ryan fighting for his life. The lack of motive only deepened the mystery. Ryan had not been robbed. His personal belongings, phone, wallet, student ID, remained untouched. There were no signs of an attempted sexual assault, no indication of an argument. To detectives, the case was baffling. Why would someone ambush a young man on his way home, inflict such violence, and then vanish without taking anything? In Kelmont, the story spread faster than the investigation could keep up. Coffee shops, schools, and workplaces buzzed with speculation. Some believed it had to be a stranger passing through, perhaps a drifter or someone living off the grid. Others were convinced it was local, pointing to the odd detail that the attacker seemed to know the shortcuts through yards and alleys. Theories grew wilder with each retelling, feeding a sense of paranoia that swept across the city. Parents stopped letting their children walk to school alone. Students avoided late-night study sessions. Even the busiest streets felt uneasy once darkness fell. For a city that had always prided itself on safety, the shift was jarring. Kelmont was no longer the small Canadian city where nothing ever happened. It was a place marked by the chilling realization that violence could erupt anywhere, without reason, without warning. The glove became the centerpiece of the investigation. DNA testing was ordered immediately, but results would take weeks. Until then, detectives had little to go on. They kept searching, combing through witness accounts and neighborhood surveillance footage. Somewhere, hidden in the gaps of memory and grainy video, was the identity of the person who had turned Kelmont upside down. In the days that followed, investigators shifted their focus to understanding Ryan Keller's movements on the night of the attack. They traced his steps back to the university library, where he had been studying for nearly 6 hours before deciding to head home. Surveillance cameras confirmed that he left the campus at 10:55 p.m., walking alone with a backpack slung over one shoulder. He looked tired but calm, unaware that his life was about to change forever. Detectives interviewed his classmates and professors, hoping to uncover a conflict or personal issue that might explain why he had been targeted. Instead, they found the opposite. Ryan was described as diligent, polite, and well-liked. He volunteered at a tutoring program for first-year students, worked part-time at a local bookstore, and rarely socialized beyond his close circle of friends. He had no enemies, no debts, and no history of disputes. The lack of motive only intensified the mystery. Investigators reviewed his route home in detail. Ryan had taken Oakridge Avenue dozens of times before without incident. It was well lit, lined with tidy houses and trimmed hedges. Not the kind of street where danger lurked in the shadows, but the exact location of the attack suggested something chilling. It had happened less than 200 meters from his apartment building, within view of a row of houses where porch lights glowed. Whoever attacked him had chosen a moment when he was nearly safe, as if to prove that safety was nothing more than an illusion. Detectives began to theorize. Was it possible Ryan had been followed from the library? Had someone watched him waiting for the perfect time to strike? Or was it truly random? A chance encounter with a stranger wandering the streets? The questions multiplied, but answers remained out of reach. The media amplified every detail of the case, and within days, Kelmont was no longer a quiet city unknown to outsiders. News trucks lined the streets, reporters interviewed neighbors, and headlines declared, "Random, violent attack shocks small Canadian city." Ryan's face appeared on every screen, his story spreading across the country. National attention brought pressure to solve the case quickly, but it also added noise. Tips poured into the police station, many of them wild theories or false leads fueled by fear. Meanwhile, Ryan lay in a hospital bed, slowly recovering. He drifted in and out of consciousness, heavily medicated and disoriented. When detectives attempted to question him, his answers were fragmented, broken by pain and confusion. He remembered walking home, remembered the cold air, but nothing about the attacker. His memory of the critical moment had been erased, leaving investigators with a victim who could not describe what happened to him. For Kelmont, the randomness of the violence was the most terrifying part. Had Ryan been targeted, or was he simply unlucky enough to cross paths with someone dangerous that night? If it could happen to him, it could happen to anyone. That thought lingered in the air, heavy and suffocating, as fear replaced the comfort of routine. The investigation pressed forward, but without a clear motive. Detectives faced a chilling truth. They were chasing an invisible suspect, someone who had struck with brutal force and then vanished as if they had never been there at all. For weeks, investigators struggled to find anything that would identify the attacker. Then, a small breakthrough came from an unexpected place, a corner convenience store near Oakridge Avenue. While reviewing hours of surveillance footage, detectives noticed a figure loitering outside around the same time Ryan was walking home. The person wore a dark hoodie pulled tightly around their face, and their walk was uneven, marked by a distinct limp. At first, the image was blurry and unclear, but when compared with witness statements, the similarities were undeniable. The figure was eventually identified as Ethan Miles, a 34-year-old man who lived only 4 blocks away from where the attack occurred. Ethan was well known to local authorities, not for major crimes, but for repeated disturbances, bar fights, trespassing, and violent outbursts connected to untreated mental health issues. His neighbors described him as unpredictable. Sometimes he was quiet and withdrawn, keeping to himself for weeks at a time, while other days he was volatile, shouting in the street or banging on doors in the middle of the night. Detectives quickly obtained a warrant to search Ethan's small, cluttered apartment. What they found inside was deeply unsettling. Hidden beneath piles of clothing and food wrappers was a stash of items that immediately raised alarm. Blood-stained clothing, a pair of gloves missing its match, and several knives of varying sizes. The stains on the clothing were sent for testing, and when results came back, they confirmed what investigators feared. The blood belonged to Ryan Keller. The glove recovered from the scene also yielded a DNA match to Ethan. The evidence was mounting, but the question remained, why Ryan? There was no link between the two men. Ryan had never met Ethan, never crossed paths with him in class, work, or social life. The attack appeared to have been completely random, a violent explosion from a man with no connection to his victim. As police pieced together Ethan's background, they uncovered a troubling pattern. He had been in and out of psychiatric care for years, often released back into the community without consistent follow-up. Neighbors remembered reporting his erratic behavior to authorities multiple times, but little had been done. The randomness of Ryan's attack now seemed less like chance and more like inevitability. The collision of untreated instability and a vulnerable victim at the wrong place, at the wrong time. News of Ethan's arrest spread quickly, shaking the city even more. For residents, the discovery that their neighbor, someone they had passed on the sidewalk or seen at the store, was capable of such violence was horrifying. Fear turned to anger. How had someone with such a history been allowed to live unchecked in their community? Why had warnings gone unanswered until it was too late? Despite the evidence, questions lingered. Detectives couldn't explain the specific motive. Ethan never offered one. He refused to speak during questioning, staring blankly at the table, occasionally muttering to himself. For many, that silence was more disturbing than any confession. It suggested that the attack may have had no reason at all, that it was not about Ryan personally, but about a mind collapsing under its own chaos. With Ethan in custody, Kelmont breathed a cautious sigh of relief, but the city's innocence was already gone. The fear remained, lodged deep in the minds of its people, who now understood that the quietest streets could hide the darkest dangers. The trial of Ethan Miles began 8 months after the attack, drawing nationwide attention. Reporters filled the courtroom, sketch artists captured his every expression, and the public waited for answers that never seemed to come. Ethan sat silently through most proceedings, his eyes often fixed on the floor. At times he twitched or mumbled under his breath, but he never addressed the court directly. His refusal to speak left an unsettling void, forcing prosecutors to rely entirely on evidence rather than motive. The prosecution presented the case clearly. They showed the jury surveillance footage of Ethan near the crime scene, his limp recognizable even through grainy video. They laid out the forensic evidence, the blood on his clothing, the glove, and the DNA match. They described the brutality of the attack in detail, leaving no doubt about its severity. To the jury, the picture was undeniable. Ethan Miles had attacked Ryan Keller with violent intent. The defense, however, painted a different story. They did not dispute the evidence, but argued that Ethan was not in control of his actions. His long history of mental health struggles was outlined in painful detail. Records showed multiple hospitalizations, prescriptions left unfilled, and therapy sessions abandoned due to lack of support. They argued that Ethan was a product of a broken system, one that had failed both him and Ryan. According to the defense, the attack was not born of malice, but of untreated illness spiraling out of control. Ryan Keller, who survived but was left with lasting physical and emotional scars, testified during the trial. His memory of the attack remained fractured, but his recovery journey revealed the damage left behind. He spoke of sleepless nights, the fear of walking alone, and the way his life had changed forever in just a few seconds. His presence reminded the jury that beyond evidence and legal arguments, there was a victim whose innocence had been shattered. After weeks of testimony, the jury delivered their verdict: guilty of aggravated assault and attempted murder. Ethan Miles was sentenced to a secure psychiatric facility rather than a traditional prison, a decision that sparked debate. Some argued justice had been served by removing him from the community. Others felt the sentence was too lenient for the devastation he had caused. The city remained divided, torn between sympathy for a man clearly unwell and anger over the destruction he had left in his wake. As the trial ended, Kelmont was left to pick up the pieces. For Ryan, recovery meant slowly reclaiming normalcy, though shadows of that night followed him everywhere. For the community, the attack was a lasting reminder that safety was fragile and could be shattered in an instant. The random nature of the violence haunted everyone, leaving them to question whether it could happen again. In the end, the case became more than just one man's crime. It exposed deeper issues: failures in mental health care, lapses in community safety, and the terrifying reality of random violence. The attack on Ryan Keller was no longer just a local tragedy. It was a story carried across the country, a chilling reminder of how darkness can erupt without warning, even in the most ordinary of places. In the end, the attack on Ryan Keller revealed more than just one man's violence. It exposed the fragility of safety in a place once considered peaceful. Detective Lisa Monroe and David Chen uncovered the truth, but the random nature of Ethan Miles's actions left the community unsettled. Professor Mark Ellis mourned the loss of potential in his student, while Sarah Turner stood by her friend, carrying the scars of fear with him. Kelmont learned a hard lesson. Sometimes danger does not come with warning, and even the quietest streets can hide a darkness that no one is prepared to face. If this story shocked you, don't stop here. Hit subscribe for more gripping true crime documentaries. Tap the like button to support the channel, and share this video with friends so the world doesn't forget how easily safety can be shattered.